Uncle Dennis, our Uncle Dennis. And this piece is, I know that he hears it. He can hear it and see it, and he's watching us. And this is for you, Uncle Dennis. We love you. This is for you. And now I have the honor and the privilege of introducing Bishop Frank Krebs, super good friend of Uncle Dennis and also a fellow classmate at the seminary at Cardinal Glennon. So, Bishop Frank Krebs.
Thank you very much, Allison. And thank you for that beautiful piece that you played. That was awesome. So I'd like to begin by thanking each of you for giving up this space in your evening so that we all could be together and honor Dennis. And I would like to call us now to just have a moment of prayer, if we can.
Yeah.
Oh God, we want to include each of us this evening in our speaking to you, and we know that we're coming from many different places. Some of us are just happy and grateful for Dennis's life. Some of us are probably confused and wondering what to think and perhaps experiencing a lot of loss. This is all of our humanity, and we all share those aspects of each other's humanity, and we can understand how we're in different places. We want to thank you right now for the life of Dennis. We want to express our desire to comfort each other. We want to thank you for all the gifts that you give us, even when our hearts are heavy and are unable to see them. Open us up to all the words of love and appreciation and thanksgiving that will be expressed tonight, so that this can be a fitting memorial of a man whom we all love. We pray all this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I would like to introduce now Dennis's aunt, Aunt Joan. She's going to read the first reading.
Thank you, Bishop Krebs. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in a palace of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord will give graces and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man that trusteth in thee. Next, we will hear from someone very near and dear to Dennis's heart, his youngest brother, Charlie Clarke.
I can't hear him.
Uncle Troy, I can't hear you.
Charlie, you're
You're
muted.
All right, very good. Now we're all back on page. Yet we do speak wisdom among those who are mature. A wisdom, however, not of this age, nor of the rulers of this age, who are passing away. We speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God predestined before the ages to our glory. The wisdom which none of the rulers of this age has understood. For had they understood, they would have not crucified the Lord of glory. But just as it is written, things which eye has not seen, and ear that has not heard, and which have not entered into the heart of man, all that God has prepared for those that love him. Everybody hear me?
Thanks,
I
Charlie.
don't. Thank you. I'm not sure who follows me. I'm so sorry.
I'm sure. Peace be with you, everyone. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you that I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Amen.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
So just give me a second here. Okay, is my voice coming through loud enough?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So it's a stunning privilege to be able to be a part of giving testimony to a life well lived. I graduated from Cardinal Glennon College together with Dennis. I spent a lot of time with him. What I remember the most is his incredible smile. It was almost like it was sculpted on his face. And the muscle memory for him was such that he would return to that smile more than to any other position of his face. And that seemed to be true when he was older as well. Even when he was in the hospital, I saw a picture of him with that same uncanny smile on his face. Dennis was a beautiful man, and members of the family and his friends are going to talk a little bit more about that in a while. What I was asked to do is to reflect on the mystery of death, because it's appropriate that we stop when someone has died and just give ourselves time to let it all sink in. I don't know if you're aware of it. I wasn't until the last few years, but they say that elephants have been doing some of the things that we do at funerals since human beings appeared on the planet. So when an elephant dies, apparently the one who notices it first will let out a trumpet call. And from miles around, other elephants who knew that elephant will come to, shall we say, pay their respects. We don't know, because we don't speak elephant. We can only watch what they do. And what they do is just like what we do when there's a body lying in front of us at a wake, and we all slowly walk by the body. We might reach out and touch the body. We sometimes go in family groups, and we just pause. One animal researcher who was talking about this phenomenon among elephants said that the amazing thing is that elephants are so ridiculously busy. They spend 20 hours a day foraging for food and eating, much busier than most of us are. I think we'd have to admit that. And yet, for some reason, when someone dies, when one of their own dies, they stop and they pay attention. They pause. Life slows down. And it's not hard. We can't put ourselves on top of them and pretend that they're human beings. They're not. We just need to keep wondering, what is it like for them? But we know that when we stop and look at the same thing and do what they do, which is to slowly run their extremities over the body, stand there almost like they're stunned, taking it all in, showing signs of affection, that when we do that, we're trying to take it all in and understand what's happening here. What is happening? But there's also a sense that we're standing in front of something that is happening, and something that is quite natural. And so we don't just look at it in shock, although we'll do that, but we also look at it as if there's something here to be learned, something deep to be taken in. And I'm not trying to put any doctrine or dogma on top of this. Please don't hear that. I'm just trying to speak about the human experience of having someone we love die and what that is like for us. Because there's a lot to be learned about God from simply paying attention to what is happening with us. Usually when we stop and put all of the rest of our important life aside, it's because something is going on that we need to pay attention to. And when we're stripped down in this way and are experiencing loss, and we feel like every part of us is just sort of breaking apart for a moment with the pain of loss. When all of that finally falls to the ground like clothes we don't want to be wearing, and we just stand there in the utter nakedness of what we are looking at in our humanity for what it is, we start noticing, almost like what's going on with a lot of us during COVID, we start noticing things about ourselves we never saw before, because so much of life is falling away. And what the ancient people of prayer of many different traditions will tell us is that when we do this, the spiritual giants of the ages attest to this, when we just allow it all to fall away, the only thing that is remaining is something that cannot fall away. Some part of our humanity that is not something we make happen. It comes as naturally to us as our breathing. And when everything falls away, there really isn't a lot there. But if we pay really close attention, what we see is something that we might give the word hope to, like some little pilot light that's burning inside of us when nothing else seems to be happening. It's a kind of a flowing inside, it's described as something that feels like it's moving, and it kind of encourages us to move. So this thing which we cannot ever really give ourselves, and yet is never not a part of us, when we pay attention to it, is like seeing the face of God. Why? Because, as one amazing monk, Thomas Merton, says, when we see things like this, it's like looking at the roots of all of creation. We're right at the tap root of it all. And it's amazing. Now, if I'm sounding too mystical or like somebody who's lived too long in a monastery or something like that, which, by the way, I never have, but I do try to pray a little bit, and maybe it just would be easy to brush off what I'm saying as though that sounds like what a priest would say. But if I really want to open up for you what happens to us when someone dies. So let's assume for a moment that we're in great grief. And even if you're not in great grief over Dennis right now, you know what grief is like. So let me use this as a point. When we're weeping and sad for a loss, it is a pain. It is something we would rather not be experiencing. But as if we allow ourselves to go deeper and deeper toward that pilot light I was talking about, what starts to happen is all of a sudden we shift and we see that the reason we are crying is because of how much we love this person. And the love for that person comes to the foreground and becomes something beautiful. But then again, it's almost like a spiral. The minute we see how beautiful it is and we remember that we've lost that, then we go back into the pain. But the pain brings us down to seeing the love again. And so we go into this cycle of we've lost something, but what we've lost is beautiful and it's inspiring, but we've lost it. And we do this often enough that we settle in on how beautiful the love is and we move to gratitude. These are all things that we cannot give ourselves. This bubbles up inside of us. It wouldn't surprise me if it, on some level, bubbles up inside of elephants and other parts of this amazing creation when one of their own, with whom they are tremendously bonded, is now gone. And so the experience of death, hard as it is, can actually be an experience of the most beautiful gifts that God is able to give us in this life if we stay with it and live with it and lean into it rather than hide from its discomfort. This is meant to be an experience of that second reading that Charlie read. A lot of times we talk about this reading as if it's talking about death in the abstract or what happens after in the afterlife. And that's a nice application, but it's not the one I want to point to tonight. I want you to see this reading as talking about what I just shared with you, that at every moment, no matter how hard a death is, no matter how hard a loss is, no matter how hard COVID is, no matter how hard all the things our country is experiencing right now might be, that underneath it all is a pilot light that will not shut off. And if we pay attention to it, then we can say with Paul, the eye has not seen, nor has ear heard the amazing things that God has in store for those who walk with God. We just need to learn how to open up the interior of our souls to be able to see what God is offering us. I was asked to share about the meaning of death. I hope that this little reflection is helpful. At the same time, I really look forward to everyone sharing about the great memories that they have had of Dennis. And before we get a chance to do that, I'd like to introduce Joe and his wife, if they would please come forward so that you can lead us in the prayers of the faithful. Excuse me, it's not Joe's wife, it's his sister Mary.
Thank you, Frank. And that was deep. And I can't just pass it by. I mean, you really, touched me what you said, and the hope that you express there. I know that light that you're talking about. I know that's God. There's no doubt in my mind on that. And I see Richard with his grandson, because I know he doesn't have another baby, that I see Richard with his grandson. And I've always thought there is no better gift possibly than when we're given a child or, someone to share our life with like that. So when we lose somebody, and it's one of the great gifts that we're given, of course, it's incredibly painful. And it is really neat, the picture you paint about that there's that light there. And eventually we get to the place where we're beyond our pain, and now we're just celebrating with gratefulness what we've been given. And so thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody else for being here tonight. It's an honor to Dennis, and we just appreciate you being here. So before Marty's eulogy, Mary and I are going to thank God for our loving brother Dennis and the influence he had on us. And if you want to add a prayer of thankfulness, then please feel free to do so. Type it into the chat box. Your appreciation of Dennis means so much to us, and we will read those and enjoy those. So I want you to think of my statement of gratitude as the cover jacket of a good book. And that book is The Life of Dennis. The theme for Dennis's life is captured in the popular song in 1969 by the
It was unmuted.
He Ain't Heavy, He's My
I
Brother.
don't know what that means. Are you muted down?
They say that good habits are better caught than taught. So I thank the Lord for the example of living by your values, which Dennis provided me. So thank you, Dan. And you continue to be used by God. I'm going to let others introduce some of the book chapters. And before I do, another really good example to me Sister Mary, and I will allow her to share. There is someone who needs to mute. There's a lot of noise in the background. But Mary?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to start with a prayer. Dear God, we want to thank you for the wonderful life of Dennis Clarke. He held a different place in each of our dear to each of us for an assortment of gifts that he imparted. The gifts of love, authentic caring, compassion, generosity, friendship, companionship, healing through physical therapy, and of course, humor, theatrics, and sheer entertainment. Thank you for all the memories, God. And today, Joe and I are recalling a few of our favorites. Upon hearing of Dennis's passing, Mary Spina, a dear childhood friend, reminded me of the time when we, as 9 and 10-year-old kids, pleaded at great length with my big brother Dennis to give us each a dime so we could walk 1.5 miles to Pete's Confectionery and buy some candy from behind the glass case. Dennis was hard to persuade, but because we continued to beg him for the dime, he finally said, "Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you will each agree to sign a contract stating that you will clean my room thoroughly every day for 2 weeks, I will give you each a dime." We each signed the contract, and Dennis gave us each a dime. We never did clean his room, not even one time. Dennis never said another word about the contract or the 20 cents, and neither did we. I think Dennis just wanted peace and quiet. Thank you, God, for Dennis's patience, generosity, and forgiveness of our 10-cent debt at a time when he was basically just a kid himself. I have another memory from my teenage years that has never faded, and I think illustrates Dennis's gift of joy through theatrics. Dennis could take the ordinary moments of a day, whether a good moment or a disappointing one, and bring humor to it. One evening, Dennis, taking his big brother role seriously, announced, "Well, Wheeze, it's your turn to do the dishes tonight." I instantly snapped back, "It's not my turn. I just washed the dishes 2 days ago. It's Brian's turn. It's not mine." To which Dennis replied, "Well, Wheeze, that's all life is just one big dish that has to be washed, and it just keeps getting dirtier." These words are unforgettable to me. They made me laugh then and even diffused my anger over the unfairness of the situation. And Brian, once again, got out of doing the dishes. I've passed that story on to my kids, and we still laugh at those words of Dennis, so dramatically spoken over 50 years ago now. Thank you, God, for Dennis's gift of humor and entertainment. He brought unforgettable joy to our lives. Joe refers to the song, "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother." I think that does fit Dennis's outlook on life. Dennis did not look at sacrifice as a burden if he thought he was doing what was in the best interest of another person. Thank you, God, for all the sacrificial love you shed abroad in Dennis's heart. Thank you for giving us the gift of Dennis. He lives on in our hearts forever. And now I want to introduce my wonderful brother, Marty, and his amazing wife, Lonnie. They definitely fit the words of this song, "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother." For 6 months, as Dennis battled through COVID-19, isolation, cancer, COVID-19 again, and then more isolation, Marty was his medical advocate. Marty kept in constant communication with the doctors and helped Dennis weigh his options at all points along the way. Marty also kept us all updated on Dennis's health status. Marty flew to California every opportunity he had to be by Dennis's side in those few windows of time when Dennis was allowed to have a visitor. It was Lonnie who had the brilliant idea to airlift Dennis to Arizona so he wouldn't be alone. Dennis could then be treated by doctors in Marty's oncology practice, and Marty and Lonnie could visit Dennis. Lonnie visited Dennis for hours every day. She looked out for him to be sure all his needs were met. She gave Dennis lots of tender, loving care and was possessed with a zeal to make Dennis's last days the best they could be. Lonnie was there with all her heart when we could not be. Our hearts are filled with gratitude to Lonnie and Marty. Dennis was not heavy to Marty or Lonnie. He was their brother. They were strengthened and fueled by grace to give their all for Dennis. I can just hear Dennis shouting thank you to Marty and Lonnie from the grandstands of heaven. Marty,
Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Frank and Joe and everyone so far who's stepped up to say something. Ani, I want to present these roses to you um, as a token of our appreciation. There's very few people that can step in and sufficiently fill in for a sibling, and you did it. You did it, and we appreciate and love you for that.
Thank you. I love Dennis. He was awesome. Thank you.
So again, thank you everyone for being here to help us honor Dennis in this way. As a eulogist, I recognize that I am speaking for all of us, but each of us has memories of the man known as Dennis Martin Clarke. Dennis, Denny, DC, Uncle Dennis, Coach Clarke, sweetheart, big guy, and the man in apartment 301. Rather than focus on my memories and stories, I want to reflect on the qualities and characters that made Dennis the person we all knew and loved. In their book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of Mature Masculine, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette describe a man with healthy king.
Dad, you just muted yourself.
I should be unmuted.
You're good. We can hear you.
Marty,
Okay.
if you would go back, you just described the words of a king.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back. Thank you, Joe. In the book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette describe a man with a healthy king energy. I mention this because I believe it captures what we all recognized in Dennis. I paraphrase, the man with the healthy king energy manifests the capacity to care for others deeply and genuinely. He recognizes and beholds them for the full person they are. He is a centered participant in creating a more just, calm, and creative world. He has a spirituality and knows the truth of the central commandment around which all of human life seems to be based. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul and all thy might, and thy neighbor as thyself. Dennis Martin Clarke was a man of faith and spirituality. Like all of us, he was also a flawed person. At the core of his spirituality was the practice of being both self and other facing. That is to say, he attended to the innate goodness and needs of others while squarely facing his own shadow. Denny had high personal standards. He was self-critical and at some level viewed himself as a failure. When cleaning his apartment with my brothers Joe and Charlie, I came across a notebook with some of his writings. I think capture his mind and heart. I share a few of them with you now. Only by eliminating my anger, hostility, negativity, and madness will I connect with my opportunities. Possibility and excitement reside in the unknown. I fear the unknown. The only thing I can do alone is feel. Everyone wants to be loved and accepted. I will use my skills to help others and change the world. DC, as some of them called him, avoided materialistic entanglements that were well within his reach. For nearly 20 years, he lived in a small apartment complex in a declining part of Los Angeles. Apartment 301 was a simple and outdated space that would have easily passed for a sitcom bachelor pad. The man in apartment 301 did not need many things and did not hide behind the things he had. He drove old and inexpensive cars that doubled as his office as he practiced as a home health physical therapist. As his vocation, Dennis chose the act of caring over the art of acting. Recently, I received a letter from one of his physical therapy colleagues. She wrote, "Dennis was one of the kindest, most caring people I have ever met. He cared deeply for his patients and his work. He would do anything to help his patients get what they need. Dennis was thoughtful, understanding, generous, and wonderful. The world has lost a very special person." A very special person indeed. At the age of 24, the big guy was looking forward to becoming a Catholic priest when our father died. Denny made a selfish decision to leave the seminary and come home and help support our mom. Around the house, he expressed his love in notable and playful ways. He tickled me and Charlie until we could no longer breathe. He made Brian cry by reading apocalyptic passages out of the book of Revelations. He closely followed and supported Joe's soccer career through high school, college, as a professional player, and then as a coach. He used his earnings as a teacher to send Mary to Narings Hall High School. True to his spirit, he faced his shadow as reflected in his writings. Possibility and excitement reside in the unknown, and I fear the unknown, and moved to LA to pursue an acting career. But Uncle Dennis was more focused on the needs of others than his own acting career. Somehow, he seemed to know that the man who becomes obsessed with succeeding has already failed. He valued others over success. Dennis routinely declined acting auditions because he had patients to visit. He befriended a single mother with 2 daughters who could not afford to send them to a Catholic high school. As he did for Mary, the sweetheart paid both tuitions, this time with his earnings as a physical therapist. In apartment 301, I found several handwritten letters from sponsored children in foreign countries thanking him for paying for their food, shelter, and Catholic education. I mentioned earlier that I am speaking for all of us, but I am also speaking for Dennis. So what would the big guy have me say? Probably nothing. Coach Clarke recently told me that listening to others was more gratifying to him than listening to his own opinion. That's a valuable insight into the King energy. What he was really saying is that he valued relationship over his opinion or the need to be right. That said, I believe he would cajole each of us to practice Christian values of unconditional love, care, compassion, generosity, tolerance, and gratitude. And now it is my pleasure to introduce one of Dennis's dearest friends, Cynthia Johnson.
Isn't that cool?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I'm really struggling with Dennis leaving us so soon. However, what I really wanted you to know was how much Dennis really loved and cherished each one of you. His St. Louis memories were always so vividly stated that they allowed me to know you through Dennis's heart. For instance, those gigantic Clarke family picnics in the park and having over 50 cousins always sounded so intriguing and fun. Then there was also the numerous seminary antics at Cardinal Glennon, which included stories of all kinds of wild rides, partying, and practical jokes that took place during his teen years. And of course, his own participation in baseball and basketball also provided numerous opportunities for me to stroll down memory lane with him on an ongoing basis. I definitely get a kick out of watching him relive some of the wilder activities he talked about involving his buddies from Glennon, because they were so different, coming from the gentle-natured, mild-mannered PT perfectionist and sports fanatic that I had with me. Now then, it was also touching to hear about the many jobs he'd worked, often simultaneously, so his mom could make ends meet after his dad died. Dad sounded so wonderful and awe-inspiring that I truly wish that Dennis could have played him in a movie. And having a father that was just as famous and just as respected for his character and integrity as he was for his displaying multifaceted athletic and coaching abilities gave Dennis very large shoes to fill. I can vouch for the fact that Dennis emulated Dad in real life every day. He was indeed his father's son, and the kind of man any father would be proud of. I also believe his love for PT came from Dad. Thus, his commitment to helping others maintain or regain proper physical movement of their limbs morphed into over 40 years of a fulfilling career in physical therapy and sports medicine. Now, I attribute his love for acting to Mom, Aunt Joan, and Uncle Frank. When Dennis would tell me about Dad, Mom, Aunt Joan, and Uncle Frank, they'd seem 100 feet tall. They were his heroes. I'd hear, "Oh, Cynthia." They'd take me to the movies with them whenever they went. Another really special time was when Mary found Dad's World War II letter and brought it over to the family during a pool game. During an earlier time, Dennis showed me his mom's monologue videos on YouTube that he'd received a link to. These were just as wonderful to find as everything else I'd seen or heard about. Dennis also maintained 10 to 25-year work and personal relationships with the staff of 3 home health agencies here in LA. These were also people he cared about tremendously, and it was easy to tell that mutual admiration existed on both sides. It was also quite common for patients to prefer to be waitlisted for a spot on Dennis's schedule rather than accept a different therapist, especially if they were prior patients. Over the years, he cut down on taking many private patients, but the ones he had for many years he kept until they died. His hands seemed anointed by God, and he had a special gift for helping to rehabilitate severe orthopedic injuries. Moreover, he was also gifted at comforting senior citizens, as many of his patients ranged from 80 to 105 years old. He could also tell when many of them were nearing their time to die, and some would usually do so within a day or two. For those patients, he'd forego traditional therapy if that's what they wanted, and he'd take them for a walk out front or play a little golf with them in the backyard or whatever they asked to do. In May, our 91-year-old friend Zig died in Dennis's arms while he and another neighbor were trying to feed Zig applesauce. One of Zig's greatest fears was that he was going to die alone, but the Lord fixed it so he was with the 2 people who were closer to him than his very own son, whom he rarely saw. Zig had been his neighbor over 25 years. 2 days before his back surgery in July, Dennis was still working regularly. You know, I do envy your 60 to 74-year relationships with him, because our 12 years together passed so rapidly and then ended so abruptly, we didn't have time to implement our next set of plans for our life together in St. Louis. Thanksgiving to New Year's was always our really special time together. Next to one of his pictures, I placed last year's Hallmark Christmas card that Dennis had given me. This simple message expresses how we feel about each other and explains why this Christmas season is so very painful. I'm just trying to get through these days moment by moment. Please pray for me. The title on the cover says, "Your love brings me joy." Every day I'm thankful for the journey we've been taking, for the time we've spent together, and the memories we've been making. When we first met and fell in love, somehow my heart just knew my world would be a special joy because of loving you. I love you, Cynthia. Merry Christmas. I'd also like to say that I love you guys and wish you a Merry Christmas. I so appreciate that much of who Dennis was is because of the love and friendship he received in St. Louis. He carried all of you in his heart and thoughts every day. At least some aspect from his entire St. Louis family, friends, and fellowship was mentioned daily. May God bless you all and keep you safe. Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Okay, I'm going to introduce our very talented musician, composer, Brian Clarke. And Brian has a song that is his original that is quite appropriate.
Come home, children. Come on home. You've been searching for so long. Come on, children. Come on home. Hear me calling. Day is done. I'm waiting, waiting, waiting for you. Waiting, waiting, waiting for you. There's not much you need to know, but to trust what's in your soul. I'm waiting, waiting, waiting for you. I'm waiting, waiting, waiting for you. Oh, come on, children, come on home. Hear me calling. Day is done. Hear me calling. Day is done. Hear me calling. Day is So this is a distinct pleasure to welcome and introduce four of Dennis's most dear friends, lifelong. John Galati, who taught me to be an altar boy. Jerry Berwin, who taught me how to sneak out of the upstairs window. Ken Mraz and Bob Baker, whose contributions are just, well, decency forbids that I get into it. But welcome all four of you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I love hearing myself talk, but in fact, I'd rather do is have Marty read that eulogy again. It was tremendous, and I can only disagree with maybe 40 or 50 things that were in it. But what I want to tell you about Dennis is nothing that you don't already know. He was the friendliest person I ever knew. He was generous. There was not a mean bone in his body. He couldn't have been vindictive or petty or selfish if he tried. Dennis loved everything. That's what I'm going to remember most. Think of the word exuberant. That's the word that keeps popping into my head. He was full of life. He enjoyed everything so much. Here's another word for you to keep in mind, blasé. It's a word you don't hear much anymore, but it's a great word. And it's certainly a word that could not possibly apply to Dennis. He was never blasé. Everything that he came across, he found something to enjoy, to appreciate. I remember how much he loved basketball, playing basketball. I remember how much he loved getting pizza at Village Inn. I remember how much he loved his trips to New York. He loved the Muni Opera. He loved his work. And by the way, I guess maybe not all of you know that among Dennis's patients, and mostly it is the old people among you who will be able to relate to these names. Dennis treated Burt Lancaster, and he also treated a man named Paul Henreid, who was in the movie Casablanca. Dennis made never any kind of a fuss about knowing celebrities, but he enjoyed the work of taking care of them, trying to make them better. At the risk of not being understood by some of the younger people who are participating here, I want to ask those of you who knew Dennis when he was young to join me in trying your best to recall his laugh. Dennis laughed wonderfully. He laughed often. He loved to laugh. And he always found things to enjoy. The last thought I want to leave you with is that Dennis, one of the things he told me a month or two before he became ill, is that it had occurred to him that he thought he would have liked to be a priest. And he thought that he would probably have made a pretty good priest. And I couldn't agree with anything more than that. If you knew Dennis even half as well as I did, you can understand exactly what I'm talking about. I'll introduce Jerry Berwin, Dennis's first cousin.
Dennis was a very special person. A highlight of my time in high school was when we stayed late on Friday nights and we walked to downtown Maplewood and took a bus to Wellston, got a bite to eat, and then before we went home. He was just a great person to be with. Dennis really supported his family, being there for Joe, his throughout his outstanding career as a player and a coach. He was Brian's #1 fan at his shows, for his wonderful shows that Brian did. And Dennis's concerns for others remind me of his mother, Jean, who really took an interest in everyone she met. And while he worked 7 days a week taking care of his patients throughout his life, or for those, I believe it was 40 years that someone mentioned, he still was devoted to his acting career and worked diligently to become an outstanding actor. There really was no one quite like Dennis. He was a shining example of love, dedication, and caring for others. He will forever be a North Star for our family and friends, and as we look off into the sunset. Thank you.
Oh, hi, I'm Bob Baker, a dear friend of Dennis since college days at Cardinal Glennon, where I really got to know him. We went to high school and college together, but really got to know Dennis in college, where we did a lot of fun things and continue to do so throughout our lives. I was very fortunate just a few months ago to be able to talk with Dennis and reminisce about some of our fun times. Especially he loved his trips to New York City, where I would go up and meet with him, and he'd be at different conferences. And we talked about one of his favorite moments was I was able to get tickets to a private party at Studio 54 back in its heyday. And I'll never forget how thrilled Dennis was that we were able to get in there. We met Gilda Radner and a lot of other stars that he knew and stuff. It was a big thrill. And I was just fortunate to be able to recreate and talk with him just a few months ago about that incident. The thing I remember most about Dennis, without a doubt, is his dedication to his family. He was all so proud of all of you. I don't think I ever called him a time when he didn't have to tell me and bring me up to date on what every one of his brothers and his sister was up to. He really just thought the world of you. In his dedication to his patients, I was very struck by. Dennis would call me late at night. He'd still be doing paperwork. And I'd say, Dennis, you do that when you're with the patient. Why do you bring all this paperwork home? I said, every other physical therapist does their reports while they're working with the patient. And Dennis would say, which is not unexpected, but I need to spend that time with the patient. You know, and I don't know of any physical therapist that has that same dedication. So just very fortunate to be part of his life and have some really great fun times with him. And I think Ken Raz is going to speak next.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for all the beautiful words. And I feel pretty inadequate speaking about this friend this very special person who I had the blessing of being a friend of for some 60 years. So I would like to tell you a little about the Dennis that I have known. Dennis did not live by the values of today's world. He did not pay attention to time. He did not care about accumulating money. He did not care about other worldly possessions. He did not care about promoting his importance, and we all know this. He did care about you, whoever you might be. He did care about what you cared about. He did care about your family, your needs, and your interests. He was honest and always spoke the truth. He was intense, persistent, committed, and focused. He did value life and people. And Dennis never put himself first. In his mind, there were others who had needs that took priority over any that he might have. I recall when Dennis was graduating with his degree in physical therapy, the head of the program at St. Louis U thought Dennis asked too many questions while doing his internships and was really a nuisance. I doubt that she ever encountered someone like Dennis and didn't appreciate someone with his curiosity. His interests were just understanding and being a great physical therapist. Her reaction was to call out Dennis in front of the entire graduating class and proclaim, Mr. Clarke, if there was any way to keep you from graduating, I would, but I can't. Well, that scene would have traumatized many people, but not Dennis. It didn't faze him. He knew his motives and knew what he knew. He became a caring, knowledgeable, and effective home health physical therapist. I know that he would treat an elderly person in a rough LA neighborhood one day and return the next day to take them for groceries. When Dennis had a serious infliction with his eyes and could not drive, he would load up his equipment and take the bus to provide home health care for the patients who needed him. Dennis would often call after 10 p.m., not thinking about the 2-hour time difference between Los Angeles and St. Louis. He would have just come home from acting class and wanted to talk about a play or go over his lines, or he'd want to talk about St. Louis U basketball, or he would want to talk about the unique adventures and characters at prep seminary or Cardinal Glennon College, or very, very often he'd want to talk about family, his family and our family. The conversations typically lasted 1 to 2 hours. I may have been tired, but I was always left with a smile on my face. Throughout hundreds of talks with Dennis, over probably thousands of hours, I can say that he never once commented about not liking someone or saying a bad word about someone. He did not criticize or complain about anything. Even as he suffered through a variety of physical challenges, he would never complain, but would explain what was happening and how the problem was being treated. He saw and enjoyed the humor of life, and he saw only the goodness in others. And this is the Dennis that I have had the privilege of knowing. Thank you.
It's kind of everything that we put together, but we'll linger a bit. If there's anyone who would like to share a story about Dennis or share something on him, and it, so we'll just leave it for that. And if nothing happens, Frank, then eventually I'm going to ask you to close us up, if that's okay.
Of course.
Oh, this is Ken. I would like to share one other thing that I had not prepared, but I know is so appropriate. Through Dennis, we had the opportunity to meet your mother, and and we can see how Dennis evolved. Having known your mother, when I would call Dennis at time, I'd get your mom on the phone, and it would be a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, talking about. He was asking us to tell her about. She was interested in us. She was interested in our family. She was interested in many of the things that Dennis was interested in. So as we got to know her over a period of years and actually attended some plays with her, we can see how Dennis became the person that he was, and that acorn did not fall far from the tree for sure.
There's just one thing I want to add. I want to thank all my nephews and my niece Mary for working hard to get this together so that we could all spend some time supporting each other with the words about Dennis. And as far as Dennis himself goes, all the comments were true and beautiful. I'll have to add one thing more about Dennis, and he was unusual about sharing his gratitude. And there's nothing like that, to have a grateful heart like Den did. We all love him, and we'll all miss him.
I just thank you, Aunt Joan. We love you. I just wanted to say that Uncle Dennis is he's the greatest. And he does love music so much. He flew from California to St. Louis when I was in high school because I got into the National Symphony Youth Orchestra, which was in Arizona, in Phoenix, and we were being conducted by Leopold Stokowski, who, if any of you know, he's like the Burt Lancaster of classical music. Big deal. And I packed just tank tops and shorts. It was freezing the entire time. And Uncle Dennis, he flew down with me. We did, Bob, we did talk about acting. We talked about putting yourself in the shoes of the character, and we just laughed the whole time. He came and watched the performances, and I saw Mahler one, and he bought me sweatshirts to keep me warm. And he was there for the whole 5 days. And then one other time when he was driving me to a gig, like this was a different time in St. Louis. He had just had surgery. They replaced his retina, his cornea. Yeah. And he didn't really have that one eye. And we live out in the country. You guys, for those of you who know, there's a bend around the road by the barn, the stables, and it is really, really sharp. And you can't see who's coming. You have no idea. So he was going kind of fast and it was dark and I got worried and I said, Uncle Dennis, are you sure that you don't want me to drive? I'll drive. We can park right by the stable and we'll switch. And he said, no, honey. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, sweetheart. And it was like the most unsure, worst idea ever. But he's never been more sure of anything in his life, honey. I just love him. He's the best. And yeah, I just wanted to share those couple of memories. And I would never have been a legacy at Narik's Hall for my mom if he hadn't sent her there. There's no way. Like, go Markers. Thank you, Uncle Dennis. And thanks for listening to my stories. He's the best.
If there's anyone else who's thinking about sharing something, please feel free to do so and just unmute yourself and speak up. We'll give you a little bit of time to do that.
Well, this is Marty again. While others are maybe thinking about whether or not they want to share a story, I'll share a brief one. I was down in the woods playing. I was probably 12 or 13 years old and down by the lake playing with a bunch of other kids. And I don't remember who, one of the cousins on the street came running down to the woods and said, Marty, Dennis wants you to come home right away. And I said, well, we're playing. And he said, no, he's going to Colorado and he wants to know if you want to go with him, like on a vacation. Now, I had never been out of St. Louis. So I got so excited, I sprinted home and, we ended up driving to Colorado. And it's the first time I saw a mountain. And I remember staying at the seminary there. I think it was maybe St. Martin's or Michael's, maybe Frank or one of the other guys would know, but we stayed at the seminary. St. Thomas, thank you. And I fell in love with mountains at that trip. And then as, things have their way in life, I ended up in Tucson, sit out on the patio and look at the mountains. I hike in the mountains and climb in the mountains. I just love the mountains. So when Lonnie came up with the idea of aerovacing Dennis from LA to Tucson so we can help him, it occurred to me that it was maybe in a small way that I was giving something back to Dennis that he had given me, because here we were together back sharing the mountains. He didn't get to see them at all really from the hospital rooms, but it's the thought, maybe tying into what Frank was talking about a little bit, this sort of golden thread of life and love that that Dennis brought to all of us. So that's mine.
He knew he was by the mountains. We talked about it a lot.
Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
So let's see, I don't want to step on someone if they're ready to jump out of their chair and share something. But if the time has come to wrap it up, then the time has come, I guess. Joe, what do you think? You want to give me a little direction on that?
I think your read is pretty good on it, Frank. Yeah, it's hard to end it. It feels like a little chapter ending. And that's all hard. I know we're all grieving and holding ourselves together. I'll turn it to you, Frank.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Let me say a little something about that. I know during this this very unusual time that we've experienced with COVID isolation that most of us are living in, and trying to communicate with each other so often on Zoom or some other ways that don't feel normal to us. It's also true that we have a great gift in this Zoom experience that we have tonight, because after all, we wouldn't be able to meet at all if it weren't for Zoom being here for us. So it's not perfect. We would rather give each other hugs. We would rather be able to hang out in something like a funeral parlor perhaps, and be able to chat in small groups and laugh about old times, and we're not able to do all that. We're not able to be with Dennis's body. But let's focus on what we are able to do. We were able to hear so many wonderful expressions of Dennis's life and appreciation for his life, gratitude welling up, which is always a pleasure to be in the company of. I think that's why so many people wanted to recall the memory of Gene Clarke as a person of gratitude, because it lifts us all up to be around someone who's grateful. So there are many wonderful things that happened tonight, and I, for one, am grateful, and I trust that most of you are too. Thank you so much for gathering and being a part of this expression. Joe, help me out if I leave some people out here, but I want to thank you, Joe, for organizing this event and doing it so professionally and so well. Thank you, Matthew, for helping us out tonight with your technical expertise. Thank you, everyone who took a lot of time to prepare a eulogy. I know how we are. You probably sweated over those things and really wanted them to be what you were saying from the heart. And they were well received, and we're all very grateful to you for that. I want to thank Brian and Allison for what they threw into their music so that we could be touched in a way that only music can, way above words. So thank you all for that. Joe, am I missing somebody I should be thanking?
Not really. I think you hit all of the siblings, and Aunt Joan, I think, is very important to see.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
And I will. I mean, what a place. Joan's a giant in Dennis's, in all of our hearts, and she's the matriarch of our family. And they were so close and spent so much time together. And we're all grateful for Joan's contribution into all of our lives, and to Dennis's particularly.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you honored Joan in that way as the matriarch of the family. So I would like, as we get close to closing here, to just say some ancient words from the funeral liturgy that most of us grew up with, that I find, first of all, it's just lovely. And secondly, it conjures up images that help us think of the grandeur of what's happening at the threshold on which we stand. So I just want to say these words to Dennis. May the angels lead you into paradise. May the martyrs receive you at your arrival and lead you to the holy city, Jerusalem. May choirs of angels receive you. And with Lazarus, who also was once poor, may you have eternal rest. So I think this concludes our service. Joe, do you want to let people who, is this constructed in such a way that people can stay if they want to talk to each other, or is it just too big a group to try to make that happen?
I definitely think that it can happen. People would have to be just very patient. And if they wanted to chat, there's a way to put your hand up so that it could be somewhat orderly. Oh, there's on your right-hand side down at the bottom, not all the way to the right, kind of right center, there's a thing called reactions. And you can raise your hand as I'm going to do now. Where am I? There I am. And so that would kind of indicate that I wanted to speak. I don't know how to take it down, so I'll just keep talking. Yeah, so we could do something along those lines. And then, Frank, before we go to that, obviously, we want to thank you. You did a fantastic job, and your words had some depth. And I don't know, you carry yourself in a
just so glad to be here.
special way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You bet. Thank you, Joe. And John.
It was just a plug. I've already said, let somebody else say something.
Oh, okay, sure. I just saw your hand there.
So much better than being in a funeral home.
In some ways, yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, I'm going to call out Richard if I can. Richard Ryan over here. He's got a beard, but Richard and Dennis just had the most amazing relationship, and maybe it's unfair for me to call him out because I doubt he could ever really duplicate the interaction they had, but it was just special. And everybody who knows Richard understands because all of us have those special relationships with him.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even know how to do this kind of stuff. I guess I don't even know if I'm on yet.
You're on.
Okay. Yeah, Dennis was special. He loved everything. Even the time I gave him some rocks in a bag and I said they were from the moon, he just thought that was the most special thing in the world. And I gave him a battery from the moon cart. And I think he still has them. I think Marty's got them now. And if you do, Marty, I'd like those back. Anyway, Dennis was special, and this was very, very nice. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for everybody.
Thank you.
I'm ready to get something.